the SEC section was categorized by a lot of activity and forward momentum, the PCAOB section tells somewhat of a different story here. One of less activity and institutional uncertainty, but there's still important developments that audit committees, preparers, and practitioners will need to understand here. The PCAOB standard setting pipeline has slowed considerably. The most consequential near-term development, QC 1000, has been delayed with an effective date now set for December 15, 2026. Beyond those carryover items, the board has very few active projects. The broker-dealer inspection program is one area of continued focus, as it has been for a very, very long time. But one area that is missing is there's a gap on guidance related to artificial intelligence since July 2024. Considering how rapidly audit firms are deploying AI tools in work paper preparation, sampling, data analytics, and more, the lack of regulatory guidance from the PCAOB is a real gap. Firms are making significant decisions about AI and auditing and a guidance in a vacuum, and that creates both risk and uncertainty here. The longer-term institutional picture for the PCAOB remains uncertain. The board's independence, its funding model, and its relationship with the SEC are all subjects of ongoing discussion in Washington. I won't speculate on what specific outcomes, but I would say the PCAOB's structure does look different today than it did 2 years ago. QC 1000 is the PCAOB's most significant standard in years, and even though its effective date has been delayed to December 2026, audit firms should not use that delay as an excuse to slow down their implementation efforts. These requirements are substantive, and the system needs to be operational, not just designed by the effective dates. The PCAOB does seem to still be reviewing the requirements, though. Late-breaking information, June 9th, they did release a supplemental request for comment that would make some targeted amendments to the proposal. The deadline for that comment period is July 9th. The proposed amendments, I'm taking this from the release, this is how they classified the intention here, was to improve coherence where appropriate with other quality management standards and to reduce compliance costs without compromising the PCAOB's statutory mission to protect investors and further the public interest in the preparation of informative, accurate, and independent audit reports. That said, some of the proposals seem to be responding to some of the initial comments. It does provide potential increased flexibility in following certain specified roles in the QC system. It rescinds the requirement for the firms with the largest PCAOB audit practices to have an external QC function. And with respect to identified engagement deficiencies, requiring an evaluation whether similar engagement deficiencies exist only if the identified deficiency could result in a failure to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to support the conclusion or an inappropriate overall conclusion on the subject matter of the engagement. So some of these new proposals are looking to pare back the initial proposal that was for QC 1000. But at its core, QC 1000 shifts the paradigm for quality control at audit firms from a compliance orientation to a risk management orientation. Firms must design, implement, and operate a comprehensive QC system that proactively identifies and manages risks to audit quality. The emphasis on proactive is deliberate and meaningful here. There was also a requirement that firms must evaluate and reach a conclusion on the effectiveness of their QC systems as of September 30th, although the new proposal suggests letting firms pick their own date now, but they would need to report to the PCAOB on their conclusions related to the effectiveness of their QC system. For audit committees and companies, the relevance here is indirect but real. The quality of your audit is in part a function of your quality control of your overall system. These systems have become more formalized and their effectiveness more publicly reported. Companies have a basis and an obligation to inquire about the effectiveness of their auditors' quality control. There are also amendments to AS 2901 and 1215. The 2901 amendment responding to engagement deficiencies after the issuance of the auditor report. All of this guidance is applied already at audit firms, but it's just not consistent in practice. But under the standard, when a firm identifies a post-issuance deficiency, it must first evaluate whether that deficiency indicates that a sufficient audit evidence was not obtained. If the evidence gap is real, the firm must attempt to obtain the necessary evidence. If that's not possible, the firm is required to take steps to prevent continued reliance on the flawed audit report, which could mean working with management and the audit committee to reissue or withdraw the report which is a significant step. Any other non-evidence deficiencies must also be remediated. The amendment to AS 1215 is more operational. It shortened the work paper completion deadline from 45 days to 14 days following the report release date. There's been significant modifications related to that date since I was an auditor a long time ago, but I think most firms have been ratcheting that time period down, but this sort of formalizes what the bare minimum requirements are here. Firms that built their workflows around the 45-day window are going to need to restructure that. Inspection data for 2025 shows real improvement. Deficiencies across the 6 global network firms, that includes the Big Four and their 2 closest peers, declined in both 2024 and 2025. That is a multi-year positive trend, and it reflects genuine investment by those firms in audit quality. Enforcement actions also fell by 27% in 2025 compared to 2024. However, those trends are occurring in a context where the PCAOB's own activity has decreased. Fewer inspections and a reduced enforcement posture naturally tends to produce lower reported deficiency rates. So some may be asking whether the quality is actually improving, or whether some of that improvement is based on the new change in measurement here.